suggestion that homicides were down in a lot of major cities around the U.S. Do you have that impression as well? And if so, was Milwaukee all that much different?
I would note that homicide was down in some cities that have embraced similar tactics that we have. It has not been down uniformly. It went up in Washington, D.C. It went up significantly in Chicago. But there are cities that have worked hard to comb through their departments and create, for example, strategic reserves out of a number of special units. There are departments that have made a renewed commitment to data analysis and the use of data analysis in those deployments. I mean, it's a toolkit. Nobody's pretending here that we've invented something wildly new. What we've done is gone into the toolkit and we've used those tools, I think, wisely. And because we've got we've got very highly capable people out there dedicated to their city. In the use of those tools, it's had an impact. Yes?
Have you broken down who's doing the killing, the age and race?
We've got good data from the Homicide Review Commission as well as from our own data. We can get that to you. You'll see that, as usual, the demographics of the offenders are always tracked very closely with the demographics of the victims.
What do you need from the state or the federal government over the next year? Maybe you or the mayor want to answer that?
Well, I mean, I'll give you a quick approach from my perspective, and then I'll defer to the mayor. I mean, there's no doubt that since 2001, there's been a disinvestment from the federal level in local policing. And I think our federal partners in Homeland Security really missed the boat when it came to understanding that when it came to local law enforcement, its greatest role could be terrorism prevention because of its connection to communities. And that arises from our core mission of policing communities effectively in a way that instills trust. That underfunding has resulted in a lot of shiny new command vehicles, but I wouldn't say it's resulted in an improvement in our ability to do our core job. And my hope is that with someone like Vice President Biden, who was a co-author of the COPS bill back in the 1990s, that there'll be a renewed commitment to investing in cities that are afflicted with significant violence.
The chief has talked a lot, and many have talked a lot about the correlation between poverty and crime, which one causes the other. I think it's safe to say that we recognize that there is a strong correlation regardless of which is the chicken and which is the egg. But what is most important, I think, is at a time when our economic situation, not just in Milwaukee but throughout this nation, is not in a good situation in terms of joblessness and the corresponding rise in hopelessness as a result of that. This is a time for both the federal and the government to reinvest in our cities. That hometown security becomes very, very important, particularly at times when you've got economic unrest as we have in this nation. So we have seen a disinvestment. I served in Congress in the 1990s when we instituted that COPS program, and we were able to get 100,000 cops onto the streets of the cities throughout this nation. I would like to see a return to that. I'd like to see better funding for programs like the Burn Grant program. I'd like to see the state help us more with some of these programs as well. As the chief said, it is a political decision as to how many resources go into the police department. We have made the calculation that by investing in police officers, we will have safer streets. That's a calculation that I will continue to make and hope to have the resources to continue to give the police officers to the chief that he needs to make this a safe city.
Might there be some backsliding if the state cuts its budget or the federal invests in infrastructure?
Again, that's why it's important for us to be here today to say we've made progress, and part of the reason we've made progress is because we have invested the resources that have allowed us to reduce crime in the city. That means we need partners at the state level and the federal level to remain partners with us and be stronger partners, because inevitably, if we see sharp cutbacks, whether it's from the state or the federal government, ultimately we are going to have to look at the police department for cuts. I don't want to do that. I think that this has been a wise investment. I think it's been an investment that's paid off. We want to continue it.
How much of an impact do you think some of the gang takedowns over the past year have had on these numbers today?
They've certainly helped. Gangs use violence to enforce their monopolies. Now, the other side of it is frequently when a gang is taken down, there's a destabilization in the environment that increased some renewed bloodshed as well. But there's no doubt that it's been of some assistance. Again, our goal has been to be a well-informed, stable, and assertive presence in neighborhoods that have the highest levels of violence. Our goal is to disrupt the crime environment by making it hard for these stable marketplaces to function. And I think that's had an impact. No doubt taking down some of these gangs has been an important component of that, but the stable engagement has also, I think, brought significant dividends.
What
Yes.
role do you think the economy will have in the next year in crime?
Well, it'll certainly have some effect. I would expect its most obvious effect would be on familial violence. Sadly, all too often, economic downturn that creates financial stress results in intra-family violence. It'll no doubt have some effect on property crime and of opportunistic property crime. Whether it has an impact, I'm not going to, if it comes to gang and drug violence, I'm not going to attribute that to the economy. That has to do with an illicit economy that functions independently of the conventional economy and has its own rules. And it's in that environment that we're going to continue to do our best to affect behavior.
Would you say that? Excuse me. Would you say that the increase in domestic homicides this last year had something to do with the economy, Don?
Well, it's obviously early to tell, but I would certainly, if you were doing any kind of longitudinal work or read the sociology of the subject, there's where there is financial stress, it is frequently accompanied by family violence. So I would not be surprised to see an increase there. And this is one of the things that's really, quite honestly, and I'm just talking to you now as a group that's our form of communication with the public that needs to know how afraid it needs to be. There are different kinds of homicide. As we move forward, I recognize that people are going to be keeping count onto the number of homicides. It's easy to do. But not all homicides are equal when it comes to the safety of citizens and affecting their behavior. And it would be helpful moving forward, to note where possible, when we're dealing with a domestic as opposed to when it's a robbery homicide or, possibly gang or drug related. There are distinctions. Some of them are amenable to our strategies, some aren't. Some of the kinds of crimes people need to be afraid of in the general public, many aren't. And it would be helpful, we'll do our best to keep you informed, but it would be helpful if we could move beyond the scorecard mentality and really get behind the numbers and understand just what's going on as we move forward into 2009.